Scandinavian bucket holder, but the person's sitting in full lotus with their hands clasped like this. And it's believed that our ancestors were really big on meditation, because what they spent a lot of time doing is, you got all winter long. A lot of times, if you can imagine, like New York's getting 32 feet of snow, and you're living in a longhouse with all your animals and all of your family, and you can't open the doors because there's 32 feet of snow 7-8 months out of the year. So all you had to do was read, practice fighting, clean house, and meditate. And they had other mind games that they played, a version of chess, which I think is a really interesting concept too. But it's this: our ancestors were a lot smarter than we give them credit for. We ignore them because they're just Europeans. Other people have more cool things. Another one I like is the Filgia, which was translated as follower. It's the equivalent of a Native American totem animal or spirit animal, if to make a loose translation, because when we talk about spirit animals in Native American, it's like a thing, and that's yours, and it's only that's your one thing, and that's how it relates to you. But a Filgia, depending on who you are and what you're supposed to try and accomplish, you can have 1, 2, 3, or 9. So you can have multiple Filgia. And they come in many different varieties. Now, a lot of people will instinctively translate them as being your personal Norn, which is like, again, it's not a fate, but it's like your personal fate goddess. We'll talk about them here real quick in a second. It can be a Desir. It can be one of your female followers. It can be, excuse me, I just drank all my water. It can be fate goddess, your Desir. It can be a guardian spirit. Now, like a lot of times, the same as the spirit animals, your guardian spirit you can either send out to fight ahead of you, or it will fight with you on the battlefield. So while you're fighting whoever, it's fighting their Filgia. And it's believed that if their Filgia your Filgia conquered theirs, then it drastically weakened your opponent and allowed you to physically conquer them. Yes, ma'am.
Isn't that a similar concept in the Golden Compass?
Yes, actually, I was thinking about that last night. It's very, very similar to that concept, and it's also based on if it meets your personality. So if you're a big nobleman, you might have a bear, or one of them could be a bear. But on that same note, women were incredibly valued in Northern Europe. So you could have a bear if you were the head of the household, or if you were a shield maiden, you could have an eagle, which means something different than the Native American translation when they talk about your spirit animal as an eagle. It's just an interesting concept with their Filgia, and they shape and they morph together. So you could have a spirit guardian that's a Norn that might even be your ancestor, and it gets really confusing. So if you're reading the stories, you have to pay very close attention. So, and if you're not grown up and born into that concept in society, it can get away from you. Yes.
Do you actually have to have Scandinavian background?
Oh no.
To be pulled in by one of the Norns?
No, they're actually a Germanic concept. So all the way down to Northern Europe, all the way down to Northern England, where the different Scandinavians and the Northern Germans and the Finns and all that overrun. And so if you're any Germanic heritage, which doesn't mean German, yes sir?
I was even going to say the Anglo-Saxon version of it was called Dutch.
Yes.
And, that's England as well.
But the church got a hold of that. And
yes.
A lot of times if you say fetch, they think you're talking about something evil and disgusting right off the bat.
Yeah.
And so that's some of the things have caught a bad rap. Like, I'm going to talk about the sauna. Do you realize in southern Germany, the church actually outlawed the sauna in 900 or 1100? I can't remember the exact date. But it's because they were too clean, and they associated being clean with being pagan. And so they outlawed saunas and regular bathing. But my personal view, that law right there, it was responsible for most of the deaths during the Black Plague, because everybody was disgusting and filthy.
Yep.
So, but anyway, I digress.
It didn't hit Northern Germany or Northern Europe nearly as hard as it did Southern.
Yep.
That's where the Holy Roman Empire is was really
Yeah.
put that toward because they're in control of both.
Very true. Very true. But what was I saying?
Sorry.
No, you're fine. I allowed myself. See, this is where I usually talk myself into a circle and get lost. So this is fine.
Sauna.
No, we're talking about the Philgia and
The Norn.
the Fetch and the Norns. And I will go on with that. We'll go on to the sauna. Now, that is actually equal to the sweat lodge. Now, in northern Germany, Finland, and Iceland, they still do the actual sauna ritual that our ancestors did from pre-Christian times. So if you get lucky to get into one of those, it's totally different. But now their saunas are hotter, and they're done in 3 rounds. Okay? The first round is done to the gods. Second round is done to your ancestors, because it's kind of an ancestor worship culture. And then the third round is done to your kindred or your community. Now, between these rounds, you step outside, and you got a bucket of almost frozen water, really cold, dump that over your head, and then you whisk yourself or beat yourself with a birch bundle. Now, the ice water is used to snap you back into the present moment, and it also stops you from thinking, so it clears your mind, so that you're open to anything that the gods or your ancestors want to tell you. Now, birch oil is actually an antiseptic, and whisking your skin with the birch bundle increases the circulation in the capillaries in your skin. It's antiseptic. It helps wash unwanted bacteria off your skin, and it's also the concept of exfoliating for the ladies who like to exfoliate. So, but the sauna, and why it's actually considered a sacred tool, because steam is considered sacred and fire represents one of the goddesses. So just walking into an active sauna is considered stepping into a sacred space. Okay? Yes, sir?
I was also wanted to ask, at the same time, the Norse and even some of the Germans believed that the universe was created from both a world of fire and a world of ice, which is represented in this whole ritual.
Yes, it is. Very cool. So it's very deep, and honestly, it's almost exactly like a Native American sweat lodge ritual, because theirs are done in rounds too. They always show in the movies where they like sit in the sweat lodge for 3 days, steaming and everything, and that's not how it works. They actually come out and they pour water on themselves and they drink, and they use something that's not birch. I forget, it's an indigenous plant that they whisk themselves with too. So they're actually very similar. Now, that's what I was going to talk about. I'm glad I doubled this up. Now, another thing about the Philgia is the concept of ferrying forth. Ferrying forth?
Like fairy?
No, like shape-shifting.
Oh, okay.
It's translated as ferrying forth. I try and do that in case somebody goes, oh, yeah, whatever. And I'm like, yeah, that's it. But the Philgia is also considered part of your soul, and so is something called Haminga, which loosely translates as luck. It's something like your family's personal luck. And we can look at it today like if you know somebody that can trip and fall off the Empire State Building, yet not get a scratch on them and find oil. That just means their family has built up all of this luck. It didn't mean that they did anything in particular, but their family had built up this huge pile of luck, and then it's just all dumped on this guy. And he seems to have a miraculous life, charmed and can do anything he wants. But it's when the Philgia and the Haminga overlap in your soul, and it's the Haminga portion that you can send out to shapeshift. Like if I wanted to go to Maplewood and do something, but I had to be here, I could send my Haminga out in the form of whatever. And it was Maplewood.
We're in Maplewood.
Yeah, I know, but I'm in downtown. That's why I'm pointing over here. And have it to do something for me. It could do that while I was here, and then it would come back, and then I would be aware of whatever I sent it to do. So that's that concept of shape-shifting. A lot of people get those confused with berserkers and ulfherdners. Berserkers being a bear and ulfherdners being a wolf, but they don't actually shape-shift. There's no part in the sagas or the Eddas where some human physically shapeshifts into something else. You'll find that most northern people, Eskimos, Scandinavians, northern Germans, they're incredibly practical people. So they tend not to get too flamboyant in any of their beliefs. A lot of them, like Northern Taoists and Northern Europeans, it's this. This is a table because it's shaped like a table, and I can sit on it, and I can eat on it. It's a table. It's not an airplane. It's not an automobile or anything like that. Now to get into the big portions. What's most resembles the concept of witchcraft from the rest of Europe is something called SPA, S-P-A. And that's their generalized magical practices. Now, a lot of SPA was done by women, because men had their own particular small, tiny niche in this area. But then again, there was other things that men could double over and do that we'll touch on in a second. But now, SPA, women have something called a distaff or a drop staff, which they use to spin wool into thread, in which they then made into fabric, and then they made into everything else. But now, there are certain practices that women can do if the raiding season or the fighting season, or however they translate it, was coming up. They would start by magically making the thread, and then they would magically make the cloth, and then they would magically make the clothes for their men to go off into battle. Now, it was not bulletproof, it was not arrow-proof, it was not spear-proof, but it worked on this concept. They grew up in this society, so I know that with love and intention and magic, my wife made this shirt for me. So that makes me feel better, and that makes me feel blessed. And so that makes me more capable of doing more things because I'm more motivated to take chances or to not take chances, however it works out for you. And it's that similar concept of magic, and women did that. And they had other things that they did too. Now, I'm going to jump to the end real quick since I'm talking about this. There are other magical practices. There's tons of magical practices that women do, and that was just the everyday women. There's another special group of women that you would call priestesses, loosely translated as the vulva. Okay, and now they were your traveling priestesses. They're the ones that the kings respected. It said that the kings would give up their high seat, which means they would take their throne, stick it on a table, and let the vulva have that for when she did her readings. Now, and she did readings, they're called Sade, or however you want to say it. And that's a reading where they sat down and they did an actual kind of journey, and they connected with the gods. Either the gods talked through them directly, or they spoke with the god's voice and told the future of a tribe or a village. Okay, and they did this quite often, even up into the Christian age, because the priests were still kind of leery of the vulva because they were perceived to have such power. So they got to keep going for a while after they crushed a lot of the other pagan or heathen traditions out.
They didn't belong to
They didn't belong to anything. They traveled. They went from place to place. They sat outside of culture so that they could work for all the villages, all the tribes. So they also made judgments on certain things, and they initiated over ceremonies and parties. They actually carried a large spoon. They served the mead, and there's a very specific ritual, very empowering, where the women served mead to all the warriors and stuff. They would hold these kind of rituals before they went out to combat, or at Yule or any of the solstices. Just like they have one called Charming the Plow, you do to get the fields ready for your garden now, or your farm if you have one. But they have that, and a lot of times just, I will not see you, so you got to like, hey, or yeah, or yell.
I was taught that the Scandinavian peoples, the Vikings, women weren't given very much power at all. The power was to the warriors.
That's post-Christian.
Okay.
Post-Christian. Pre-Christian, it's very funny. I'll touch on this for a little because I always find this amazingly funny. In pre-Christian Teutonic tribes, the woman was equal. Nobody was over the other. Everybody had a job to do, and they did their job well. But if a woman was unhappy with a man, she could divorce him. And you knew somebody was getting a divorce because the woman goes out into the center of town to start with. And she starts telling everybody that her husband, whoever, is such a pig, and this is what's happening. And then she gathers this large crowd of people around her. Then she starts the divorce procedures by taking everybody to the bedroom and says he is such a useless piece of whatever in this bed that yada 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 yada. So it always starts in the bedroom, and then she takes him around the house, everybody around the house, and tells him that how he doesn't do this or he can't even do that. And this is how a woman divorces a man in that society. So they had a lot of power. It's not like, you know, they could just like slap him and knock him down. In fact, there's one of the stories where the man offhandedly backhands a woman, but her kindred, our clan, found out about that, and they ended up killing her husband for that act because he disrespected a woman. So it's times change. There's a big difference between pre and post Christian Northern Europe. Huge difference. Then everybody knows the concept of wort cunning, probably. That's the word that means the same thing over most of Europe, just herbal, working with herbs in a healing fashion. Whether you make poultices or teas, on how to dry them, how to prep them. And we're going to touch on the concept of some of the herbs that are different when we talk about smudging, because most of Europe smudges things. In fact, in Northern Europe, they still do. But one of the things is that they always start smudging with juniper and cedar in the early spring, because you've been locked in a house for 8 months with your pigs, your cows, and your dogs, and however many other family members are living with you. And the first thing you do is throw open the door, throw open the window, and spray something or smudge something around that does not stink. Okay?
Very potent.
Very potent. And there's some saying that some of it might be antibacterial, yes, no, but pre-Christian they were very clean. And so they also, as a ritual of scrubbing your house down. This is supposedly where the concept of spring cleaning comes from. Okay, we already talked about, Fornthrife. It's a concept of, think about Reiki. It's a concept where the women, the female healers, would manipulate energy through their hands. You can think of it like hands-on. What's that called that nurses do?
Healing touch.
Healing touch, thank you. Healing touch, maybe Reiki. There's not a lot. It's only mentioned like twice in all of the sagas, but it's there. And we had that, but I haven't met anybody that can really do that beyond, I'm doing Reiki and calling it this. Yes?
I was going to say there are some practitioners who are trying to bring it back up and do energy work. Not so much, a lot of them have a Reiki background, but they're trying to go to the pre-Christian sources and see what's in there. You know, the few Anglo-Saxon sources and a couple of things from Germany. But
It's hard to find.
very, very hard to find.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there any connection with that to like the Appalachian people who do like the leaning on the hands and that kind of? I know that is a Christianized concept, but there's a lot of old Appalachian people who practice sort of a cult type healing.
They were, but most of Appalachia, if I remember, are Irish and Scottish, and they're a little too far south to be considered Germanic. And Cornish? Cornish? You know, so there might be. I don't know. My family that came from there was Irish. So.
I was going to say there is within the Pennsylvania Dutch. There are women, I forget their name is, but one of the things they do is like a laying on of hands, and they think that may be when they get together on what they call powwow.
Yeah, I'm familiar
That
with it. Powwow.
they think that a lot of that came back from the old Spanish traditions of Pennsylvania Dutch.
See, because the other half of my family is Pennsylvania German, and they didn't have anything like that. So, but that's kind of cool, actually. What is it called again?
It's I forget what they call the actual practice, but when they get together and teach it and do it, it's powwow.
Okay.
Silver Ravenwolf does a book called Hex Magic that's on it.
Oh, okay.
So, and that's what she's gotten into now instead of tomorrow with the one-on-one series. That's what she's massively into now.
Very cool. Yeah, now I know I've got a copy from World War I of one of the hexes that the German family sent with their sons back over to Europe. and things, because we did bring hexes with us over here, and we sent them. They're like a letter. I've seen it in her on one of her websites, and it's just this big letter. It was written in German, but you can get hers in English, and it's got the different hex symbols on it, and it's got this thing, protect whoever, let it be known, yada yada. I can't remember because it's a full page, and they carried those with them the entire time they were over in Europe in World War I, fighting against the Germans and the other ones. But it is very interesting. A lot of our German stuff we don't know because it's hidden or Christianized in the what are those people? The German Christian people that with the beards, and they live with that. The Amish, yeah, because you'll see the Amish have tons of hexes all over their barns.
Yep.
Tons of hex signs. But I always found that interesting.
Don't tell them that they're pagan.
I don't know that. I don't know if they know their hexes. I don't know.
And the Amish are the ones who actually do the powwows. They have like a separate group. It starts with a B, yeah. And those are the Pennsylvania Dutch, the Mennonites, and all the Anabaptist subgroups.
Oh, that's actually very cool.
Yeah, who do that. They're the ones who get together, have the powwows, do hexencraft.
And now, bouncing back to Sade, I thought that men could practice Sade, but there's this whole drawn out thing you had to do. You couldn't just stand up and say, I'm a Sade practitioner, and I'm a guy. You had to go through this whole training, and you had to develop and prove that you had what's called a spiritual womb. If you didn't have your spiritual womb, you couldn't be a Sade practitioner. You couldn't serve mead. You couldn't sit in a high seat. Because women were the ones that could tell the future all year long. Traditionally, it's not so much anymore, but traditionally, men only use the runes to tell the future at Yule and at family weddings. Like if your son or your daughter was getting married, the father might whip out the runes on a white cloth and say, this is what you look for your future, or this is what you should think about changing, or yada, yada, yada. So women were more open to big festivals and being able to tell the future through Sade if they could all year long. But there's this process where they gather these maidens around them and they sing this song, the Sade song, and there's usually 9 maidens, and it kind of sets them in this trance. So you can think of like, it's a very rhythmic drumming kind of chanty song, and what is her name? I'm so horrible with names. I should have wrote it down. Anyway, there's a lady in Minnesota that she actually comes down to lightning across the plains, and she has tried to regather. The song is lost, but she's tried to regather rewrite the song from what she can find of it, and she performs it in the heathen get-togethers in Kansas City and everything.
You took it out Trey Osmond?
No.
It'll come to you at the end of it.
Yeah, it'll come to me soon. She's got a book out on the runes, but it's not Freya Oswin. But anyway, okay.
Okay, now, when you say they did counseling, did they do like the whole runic counseling like you have?
No,
with
the runic counseling is a more modern thing Freya Oswin invented.
Okay.
Now, also, we talked about the drumming. A lot of times they didn't use drums because, bless you, because they're carried things with them. And so they didn't have rattles, they didn't have a lot of drums, but they had their staffs, the vulva did, and some of the male practitioners. And so they used their staves to beat out the rhythm for certain things that they wanted to do. Okay? And it was also a badge of honor. Along with the spoon, a vulva always had her staff, or sometimes a large wand. They were called Gandwan wand wielders. And but it symbolized that their spine was in harmony with the world tree. And that's why they used their staff to set the tone when they needed to travel the world tree during their shamanic journeys. That's why today in a lot of the movies you always see the wizards with big staffs. That's supposed to be their badge of office.
Translated the gender.
Yeah. And then with the runic divination, a lot of the men were Galdr practitioners. That means chant or sing. And they used the runes for most of the magic that they did. Because if you didn't use the runes and you practiced magic, So you were usually considered unmanly. It was one of the unmanly things you can do. Even though Odin started a war to learn Sade and Spay, it is still considered unmanly if you practiced those kind of arts. Of course, nobody probably got in his face except for Loki one time and said, "Kind of a female there, aren't you, sir?" But nobody did that except for Loki, and then it was bad for him after that.
Yeah.
But you use runes. You can put runes together, and it's called a bind rune. Pretty straightforward and simple. So you mix anything you want to accomplish. It's kind of like, think of it like writing a spell. If I wanted to stop something, I would use the rune Isa, which is just the letter I in German, and it's a straight line. It's a stick, and it means to stop, to hold, to freeze. That means ice. And I could combine that with, say, I wanted, I don't know, to stop her from lactating. I would combine that with Berkana. It's the big B, and so I've made a bind rune of Isa and Berkana, which means because the Berkana can sometimes stand for breastfeeding. So I've combined those runes together, and I've given her a charm to help her stop lactating. Okay, and that's kind of the concept that men would do. But men would also use runes for healing, which is very dangerous, because there's my particular favorite story is there's a little girl that's sick, and this little boy, he likes to think of himself as a man, and he can step up and help this girl. So he makes these slips of wood and carves runes on them and preps them and colors them and puts them under her pillow, and the next day she's like 10 times worse than she was the day before. But the local rune master comes in and is looking at the girl, and he finds these runes under the pillow, and he realizes that the boy is really screwed up. So the first thing he has to do is break up and burn the runes that the boy did. And then he has to go through the concept of making the correct runes and putting them on the girl, and then she gets healthy. Yes?
I was also going to say, for those of you who don't know and haven't studied the runes, be very careful when you get into bind runes, because one of the big things is that when you write runes, you can also have hidden ones in there that you don't know about that you're writing, but you can't see that, Isa's a good one. You might draw a line to do another rune, but in that is Isa, to stop something. When you want the complete opposite. Yep. So it's something to be very, very careful about and study a lot before you even attempt.
But that's one of the rules is to know what you're doing, know how to do it. You need to know how to empower each rune as you do it. You can't just write a bunch of runes down and call it a day. So they're very specific, it's very individualized, and it's very important that you pay close attention to how you do things. But now, when I teach a rune class, we always talk about runes for healing, and I will automatically throw out diarrhea or loose stool, because there's always somebody that goes, "I would use Isa because it stops it." And I said, "Really? You want to stop your intestines up? Think of overdosing on Imodium."
Yeah.
It's that kind of concept. So like you have to be careful of leaping on things in your first initial takes on things. So you have to really study. Now, also to use the runes, there's actually a whole training process. I know a lot of people buy runes, and that is totally fine. You can buy them; they can be made of plastic. It doesn't matter, because there's Anglo-Saxon, Elder Futhark, Younger Futhark, Armenian. I mean, whatever makes you happy. You can have them. They're supposed to be made out of nutwood, but you can go crazy and have them made out of stone. This is the 21st century. But to use the runes correctly, there is training that usually takes at least 12 months to go through. Because, and this is why, if I say A, most people will think of apple. If I say B, most people think of boy. If I say C, most people think of cat. And it's the same concept. If you don't have that spontaneous reaction in your brain, if I say Fayu, if you don't think mobile wealth, then you're not ready to even start working with the runes. Okay? So it has to be that concept that they have to be ingrained into your subconscious, just like your alphabet, A through Z. Any questions on those? Because I know those are very popular before we move on. Okay.
You might want to talk about how many levels.
Of
there
what?
are in particular rooms. We've got the basic level, mobile level. then you've got,
Well, yeah, there are different levels to the different understanding. You know, like mobile wealth, it means like cattle, and you know, you start off the winter with 100 head of cattle, you're rich. By spring, you got 2 cattle, and now you're poor. That's what mobile wealth means. Yes?
I was also going to say there's a progression. There's not just one set of runes, and even a lot of the ones that are sold in stores are based off of this guy Rune's book, which is not historically accurate as well. And then you have several progressions throughout the centuries as just like our alphabet has evolved, the runes evolve. And say if you work with the Elder Brufard, there's also some of them can be not just a common meaning, but there's also, you can get a personal meaning from it by meditating on it, listening to what it says. And there's also the Anglo-Saxon runes, which are, they have poems, which can give you an even deeper understanding of these. So you should look at the meanings as they progress, and also what they mean to you as well.
Yeah, but runes are such a huge subject. Like he's talking about runic meditations. There are actually runic meditations for each one to ingrain them in your subconscious. But we could talk for the next 4 hours just on runes and the things like that. So, and then my last topic, I'm going to go ahead and pull that out, is I am not as good at this as my wife. So I'm going to use a cheat sheet for this one. Is Northern European smudges. They do not use sage in Europe. But we do here. We use sage because I learned to use sage when I was studying Native American ways. But
by the way, garden sage works just as well. For those of you who don't have access to the white sage, whatever, you go garden sage, that works just as well. I figured that out.
I mentioned cedar and juniper earlier. That's what they use to clean their houses every spring and to smudge them out. Also, cedar and juniper are used before most major rituals in northern Germany. So they're considered very sacred, very powerful. Woodruff is used, and it's not sweetgrass. It looks like sweetgrass, and a lot of places in Germany they will call it sweetgrass, but everybody knows it's woodruff. Okay, but you braid it and you burn it like incense, just like you do Native American sweetgrass. But yes, sir.
I also wanted to add in that a European version of sage is mugwort.
Yeah.
And that's actually personally what me and my wife use and what our community uses.
Yeah, we just made our fresh mugwort.
Cool.
Yep.
Yeah, I've got mugwort everywhere hanging, drying and.
But actual sweetgrass only grows in North America, Canada, and Scandinavia. So everybody, most Northern Europe uses woodruff, but it's lovingly called sweetgrass because it's also called kiss me quick, and because of that, it's sweetgrass and all that. And then the mugwort. The mugworts are very good for cleansing, protection, healing, consecration. You can actually let it smolder and use during dream work, trances, and intuitive development. But those are the major.
It can give you hallucinations, especially taking.
Yes, don't drink mugwort unless you know exactly what you're doing.
Woodruff, mugwort, and what else?
Cedar and juniper. Cedar and juniper are the big ones that they use for everything. When in doubt, mix cedar and juniper together. And they always use them together. They're tied in together in a bundle. And you can burn them separately, but for rituals in Northern Europe, they're always tied together in the same bundle and burned that way. Okay. Woodruff is used by itself. It's braided up like sweetgrass. And then the mugwort. You just make it like a little sage bundle, and then you can burn them after it dries.
I know when you dry the woodruff, you get that vanilla,
Yeah.
vanilla smell. So I'm assuming you burn it. I've never burned dried woodruff before, but I wonder if you get that aroma.
I've seen them have the bundles because they'll also put it up over their door, just like a sweetgrass for protection. So I've never seen it burn. I know we can never get sweetgrass to burn for nothing unless you toss it in the fire.
Seriously.
You can't light the end of it and it'll like smolder for a minute and then go out. So, but it burns really well in the fire when we burn it every year and put up a new one. So that's kind of what I want to touch on, all the basic ideas of, what is similar, what is not. Because I know, I'm talking to a lot of people, and including myself, I get confused thinking we don't have anything. We are so lonely and we are so poor because we have no spiritual traditions, but we do. And so I hope I would help some people. If you had any questions, you had any ideas. Does anybody have any more questions? Awesome.
Do
Yes.
you have the name of a book to read to get started on runes?
I'll start it on runes.
Like start like started like one
Maria Osmond.
archaeology can tell and I think up to Germanic.
Oh, that's good.
Tacticus was written.